Hello, I'm Laura Shelton and I'm a partner at HCR Law. I'm joined today by my colleague in the healthcare regulatory team, Caroline Barker, and we're going to be having a discussion about challenging Ofsted inspections and some bits about Ofsted enforcement. Hi Caroline, thanks for joining me for this discussion. What would you say Ofsted is like as a regulator and what should providers be aware of?
We've been helping providers deal with Ofsted over a number of years, whether that's because Ofsted have taken enforcement action or inspections in relation to children's homes, for example, or because they're on the periphery of another type of proceedings that a children's home might be involved in, such as a LADO or a serious case review. They are quite different to some of the other regulators that we deal with. So, for example, under adult social care, you get 10 working days in which to challenge an inspection report. With Ofsted, it's only 5 working days, so there's actually a very short period of time in which to challenge the reports. Ofsted say that you cannot challenge the judgments or the behaviour of an inspector as part of the inspection report process, again, which differs to CQC, and they want you to put in a separate complaint. And also the inspection reports of Ofsted themselves are very high level. So actually sometimes it can be very difficult for providers to understand the allegations that are being made against them. Ofsted also have a process which is called a compliance notice. So they can issue a compliance notice similar to a warning notice in adult social care, where they are saying that you have breached the regulations and then you have time in order to put it right. There's no statutory right to challenge a compliance notice. However, we have made representations in relation to these in the past and Ofsted have withdrawn them.
So what types of enforcement action can Ofsted take against a provider?
Well, I've mentioned compliance notices, which as I say, is Ofsted saying you are in breach of the regulations and then providing you with a period of time in which to put them right. They can take action to cancel your registration. They can suspend your registration or vary it. They can take action on an urgent basis, so they can suspend on an immediate basis, or they could even go to a magistrate's court to close the home down completely. They also have the power to issue a restriction of accommodation notice, which is quite unusual.
Yeah, maybe we should explore that in a bit more detail. As you say, it is unusual. Can you explain a bit more about restriction of accommodation notices?
Yep, certainly. So these are served on a provider when Ofsted feel that there is a risk to a young person, a child, or even an adult. And they essentially act as an embargo. So what they do is they take effect immediately and a provider is unable to admit any further children or young people to the home. So they can actually retain the children that they already have but can't take in any more. Ofsted will notify every single local authority in the country that they've issued this restriction. And of course that can then make local authorities a bit twitchy around leaving their existing children in the homes. So we often see that even though a provider is able to retain the young people that they currently have, local authorities start pulling them out. Now, there is the right to appeal a restriction of accommodation notice, and you have a time frame in which to do that. Or Ofsted are actually supposed to keep a restriction of accommodation notice under review. They normally set them for about a 12-week period. That is to allow an investigation to take place, normally under Section 47 of the local authority investigation procedures, or with a view to reducing risk.
Lots to think about and lots of opportunities there for challenge. In terms of the other enforcement action, what are the potential implications for providers if Ofsted take enforcement action against them?
Well, the first thing to consider is, of course, the ratings, which are obviously important to all providers of health and social care, because local authorities will look at those to see whether they ought to be placing at the home at all. So it's very unlikely that you will get any new placements if you're rated requires improvement or inadequate. Of course, ratings will impact your insurance, so could affect your premium, could increase your premium if you have a poor rating, or of course not get any insurance at all. And if you're in the process of speaking to your bank about loans, then they will consider your rating in order to determine whether there is a risk to their service. Obviously, Ofsted enforcement action can have a financial impact on providers. I've mentioned restriction of accommodation notices, so essentially that's an embargo, so providers aren't receiving monies from commissioners, and equally if a home is cancelled, businesses can be lost altogether. There is also a serious implication for people who are involved in the running of a children's home if their registration is cancelled, because there are disqualification rules, which means that they cannot be involved in or have a financial interest in a children's home in the future. So some really serious implications for providers and their senior management team.
Yeah, on the disqualification in particular, that for me over the years has seemed to providers to be something lesser known about Ofsted enforcement. More recently, I've actually seen in the notices that Ofsted actually make it a bit more obvious to a provider, but that's not always the case. Yeah. So I guess our advice would be to take any notices seriously and to get advice at the earliest possible opportunity.
Absolutely.